At the beginning of Red Dead Redemption 2, we join the Van der Linde gang in May of 1899 as they are escaping through a particularly harsh snowstorm in the mountains. Why? Because of an attempted robbery gone wrong. This infamous event is not something we see in either Red Dead Redemption game, however, it is referenced in great detail, leaving us to pick up the pieces and figure out what exactly happened. Of course, I'm on about the massacre that occurred in Blackwater, West Elizabeth, a pivotal moment that arguably signified the beginning of the end for the Van der Linde gang. I have done a video on this topic in the past, in fact it's my second most popular video of all time, but in hindsight I feel it's a tad inconcise and perhaps convoluted, so now, with years more of experience and skills to add on top, I thought it was the perfect time to revisit the subject. So if that's something that appeals to you, then keep watching, because this video will be right up your street. So fetch yourselves a brew, and a biscuit, or 10, and sit down and enjoy the Blackwater Massacre Revisited. Whilst the game begins in the mountains after the incident in Blackwater, Arthur Morgan carries around a journal in which he documents anything of note that occurs. Unfortunately, when we first get to look at this journal, it isn't completely empty and blank. It has an entire chapter dedicated to his perspective of the events in Blackwater. A priceless find to help us establish a chronology. The perfect place to start then, as Arthur is the playable character, meaning his perspective is our perspective. What he knows, we should know. So I'll give that chapter a read and interject with necessary lore as and when. Then once we've done that, we'll figure out other perspectives, and then beyond, so we can figure out what exactly happened. So, let's get cracking. Blackwater. I bought this new journal after the last one got destroyed in that fire all those months ago, whenever it was. Haven't written or drawn much in the past few months, but I was missing it more than I thought I would, and finally near a store, so here I am, I guess. After all that business up north and the fire, we spent a few months in the wilderness travelling down from the northern grizzlies. Stuck mostly in the western foothills of the mountains during the worst of the winter. Food was easy to find and life was good. Dutch had a lead for some land we were going to buy, but the land did not match up to his criteria, or he got spooked. We were being watched by the law and that somebody knew who he was, and we never bought it and we are wandering still. We picked up a couple of new folk in the grizzlies. Jenny, a sweet young girl we met abandoned on the roadside, and Micah, an outlaw Dutch met in a bar someplace. Dutch seems very taken with Micah, who is pretty hot-headed, argumentative, and full of himself. Hosea and I are less sure. Guess we shall see. Eventually, we came out of the wilderness and are now holed up outside of Blackwater, although sometimes I stay in town, hunting for opportunities. Firstly, for reasons that will become clear pretty soon, we as the players never get to meet Jenny Kirk, but Arthur also mentions the introduction of Micah Bell to the gang. Micah joined the gang 5 months prior to the Blackwater robbery in 1898, after meeting Dutch Van der Linde in a town in the Grizzlies named Crenshaw Hills, where Dutch was attempting to sell gold that the gang had recently stolen. However, when the deal went pear-shaped and turned dicey, Micah stepped in to save Dutch's life, which in part explains why Dutch vouches for him when other gang members generally dislike him. Why is any of that relevant? Well, were it not for Micah's involvement, it's arguable that the events in Blackwater would have panned out very differently. You'll see why as we go, but back to the Blackwater chapter now. I might be onto something. We got plenty of money and the trail we took was so torturous and slow nobody could have followed us south and east, or figured out where we was heading. We was thinking about California, but then Dutch and Hosea brought us down to Blackwater. Blackwater has apparently grown a whole lot since any of them was last here. I was told to expect little more than a trading post, but the place is growing fast and it's almost a small city. The town seems to be riddled with corruption, but there's certainly plenty of money here. It's good to be sleeping in a bed from time to time and living a more civilized life after so long under canvas, but I do not particularly like being this near to a town. We are living here, camping outside town mostly, hidden in plain sight I guess. Life seems pretty easy. Abigail and Marston keep arguing. I wonder why exactly he came back. He cannot seem to decide if he wants to be a father to that boy of his or not. The arguing is exhausting. I heard talk of a man who sounded like Trelawney, but we haven't seen him for many months. It's unclear if this means Trelawney was present at this point. In Chapter 2 he catches up with the gang and discloses that he had been to Blackwater to see the aftermath of the incident, yielding information about a captured member of the gang. But had Trelawney been about during the events, it would make no sense for him to have not attempted to make contact prior. So it's unclear if this suggests the presence of Trelawney or just somebody who resembles him. From the player's perspective, a man with a top hat in the Red Dead universe could mean Trelawney or the Strange Man. But for the characters within this universe, it could mean literally anybody. So for it to come to the attention of any of the characters who know Trelawney, I feel as if actions and demeanour would need to be described too. Therefore, I feel as if this probably does reference Josiah Trelawney, as unless there's something otherwise ominous going on already, the Strange Man doesn't typically garner much attention. That's not to say the Strange Man wasn't there. It's my belief that he is at least somewhat omnipresent, so arguably he was. Hosea and I are onto something. Something pretty big. Might be a lot of cash coming in to do with a real estate scam Hosea thinks he may have discovered. I am not sure yet. The perfect crime, we think. One where we rob crooks. We are being real careful. It's fun working with Hosea again. The man is an artist of nonsense. Even if nothing comes of it, we are having an amusing enough time. It's good to be running scams again. Hosea is a born huckster. He is getting anxious, worried that by lingering in town, we are going to bring undue attention to ourselves. But Dutch thinks he is onto something big. His words, not mine. Bank money being brought in by boat, apparently. So for now, we are working on both things and seeing what happens. Plan is to flee west into desert country someplace if we can. Micah and Dutch are planning to rob the ferry in town. They think it's laden with riches, cash coming in for the banks, coming in by boat. For once, I am not getting involved. Hosea and I are too taken up with our business, which I believe could go very well, and Dutch seems confident that with the group assembled, all will be okay. With Arthur and Hosea busy doing their own thing, it's interesting that Micah is the one helping Dutch plan the ferry robbery. The plan is for them to carry out the job, then flee into the wilderness out to the west. The next day, Hosea and I carry out our scam and join them. Dutch seems happy and excited. He's talking again about California, but he's also talking about a lot of other places. From here on out, there is nothing in the journal until the beginning of the Coulter chapter, which reads as follows. We have been running for weeks. I mean running more than usual. The job they was pulling in Blackwater, robbing that ferry, it turned into a disaster. Young Jenny got killed, poor thing, while Sean and Mac both got arrested, or killed, nobody seems quite sure which. Dutch shot a girl. I am not too sure if by accident or design, and seems like it might have been a setup. We took to the hills in an almighty scramble, leaving money and most of our things behind. Then, as we were fleeing east over the Grizzlies, an almighty storm hit us. Davy Callender, who had got shot in the gut on the raid, passed away. It was brutal to watch, and the rest of us nearly froze. but we found shelter and have been resting here in some old abandoned mining town while we await the thaw. This is where we join the Van der Linde gang with some of its members lost, missing or injured. They find a shelter, but Davy Callender, who was injured, dies. The gang's morale is clearly low after the events in Blackwater, so Dutch gives this speech.
Listen to me, all of you, for a moment. Now, we've had, well, a bad couple of days. I loved Davy, Jenny, Sean, Mac. They might be okay. We don't know. But we lost some folks. Now, if I could throw myself in the ground in their stead, I'd do it, gladly. But we are gonna ride out, and we are gonna find some food. Everybody, we're safe now. There ain't nobody following us through a storm like this one. And by the time they get here, well, we're gonna be long gone. We've been through worse than this before. Mr. Pearson, Miss Grimshaw, I need you to turn this place into a camp. We may be here for a few days. Now, all of you, get yourselves warm. Stay strong. Stay with me. We ain't done yet.
And then Dutch and Arthur ride out to find some food, where Arthur asks an important question.
I ain't had time to ask. What really went down back there on that boat?
We missed you. That's what happened. Come on.
It's certainly not the answer that Arthur was after, but it confirms that things went badly, and Dutch will have a hard time justifying his own actions, and therefore doesn't try. However, on the ride we can ask him if he thinks it was a trap.
So, do you think it was a trap in Blackwater?
That many men? Oh, they knew we were coming. But there was money on that boat, all right. Lots of it. I stashed what we took with all our money in town right before we fled.
From the angle of a leader, Dutch isn't exactly portrayed as reliable or trustworthy. But from the perspective of an experienced outlaw, his insight here is invaluable. Was it a trap? If Dutch thinks so, probably. And as we know, the Pinkertons are pretty quick to dedicate resources to chasing the gang over the course of the entire game, which leads me to believe that they already were on the trail of the Van der Linde gang, so it makes sense that they would have set a trap or two for Dutch in Blackwater. And besides, they do a similar thing in Chapter 4 in Saint Denis. And as Arthur's journal stated, him and Hosea were both concerned about the gang drawing too much attention to themselves. Dutch isn't the only one with interesting things to say about Blackwater in Chapter 1. We can have this conversation with Javier.
You were there, Javier. What really happened on that boat?
We had the money, it seemed fine. Then suddenly they were everywhere.
Bounty hunters?
No, Pinkertons. It was crazy. Raining bullets. Dutch killed a girl in a bad way. But it was a bad situation.
That ain't like him, though.
Davy got shot. Mac and John, both shot too. Sean, we don't even know. I'm surprised we escaped at all. By the time you boys showed up from the other side of town, we were only just holding on.
Bad business, all right.
Another first-hand account tells us that the Pinkertons appeared to have set a trap. It's not too hard to believe now. It wouldn't be the only instance of the Van der Linde gang thinking they are more incognito than they are. After this, we learn that John Marston was also shot in the Blackwater ferry robbery. Though, if you played Red Dead Redemption 1 first, you would know this already, but we're doing this chronologically By the beginning of the events of Red Dead Redemption 2, he was well enough to go out into the cold and get himself mauled half to death by wolves. So the gunshot injury he sustained in Blackwater was not too severe. In this chapter we also discovered that Charles Smith managed to burn his hand somehow. On the whole, however, chapter 1 doesn't give us an awful lot of information besides this. Besides, of course, from Dutch's confidence that Mac and Sean will be back, as at this point it's unclear what became of those two. However, enter chapter 2 and we're now unleashed on the open world, meaning we can, I don't know, maybe go off and buy a newspaper. In the New Hanover Gazette number 27, which you can purchase from the town of Valentine, there is an article titled Blackwater Locked Down, and reads, "Bank boat heist, largest robbery in years. Dutch's boys accused, bounties placed. Furnishes a sensation among residents. Money believed stashed by outlaws." After a bloody shootout that resulted in the seizure of a large quantity of banknotes being shipped by boat, Pinkerton agency officials have restricted access to the town of Blackwater while a massive manhunt is underway. Officials issued bounties on the heads of Dutch van der Linde and his gang, commonly known as Dutch's boys. Banks looked to shipping assets via boat as a more reliable means of transportation, impervious to thieves. The deadly attack resulted in the loss of $150,000, the largest robbery in the region in recent years. Authorities believe that the men may have stashed the money in Blackwater before fleeing. Reports indicate that many are searching high and low for the stash, upending public spaces and neighbours' gardens. Residents of Blackwater view the lockdown with contempt. Businesses who depend on shipments of dry goods, sundries and catalogue sales complain the Pinkertons have caused an unnecessary burden to life and welfare. We discover that the gang made off with $150,000 from the boat they robbed in Blackwater, but they had to stash it nearby, as we already know. However, the article informs us that civilians in Blackwater have caught wind of this. Furthermore, we also know the town of Blackwater is locked down by the Pinkertons, who are on the trail of the van der Linde gang. I'm sure we'll encounter them plenty later. However, for the time being, this detail is confirmed by Josiah Trelawney, who catches up with the gang in Valentine in chapter 2.
Making new friends again, I see, Arthur.
Look who we found sniffing about.
Josiah Trelawney.
The very same.
Well, I thought you'd gone to New York.
And miss all this glamour. You must be joking.
How are you?
Well, quite well indeed. I went to Blackwater looking for you gentlemen. You're not very popular there, it seems. Ah! Javier and Charles. I've missed you. And Bill looking as well as can be. Gentlemen, always a pleasure.
You're right. We ain't too popular in Blackwater.
We left a lot of money there.
And young Sean, it seems.
Sean, you found him.
Yes, I have. He's being held by some bounty hunters, trying to see how much money the government will pay them. I know he's in Blackwater, but there's talk of them moving.
Well, if we step foot in Blackwater... Well, then we're dead men for sure.
There'll be Pinkertons all over the place, but if he's alive, we gotta try.
Yeah, of course.
It's you they want, Dutch.
Always is.
Thanks to Trelawney, we also discovered that Sean Maguire is alive, albeit being held prisoner. So after a nice bath, we must ride out and rescue him. We encounter Charles and Javier viewing Blackwater from the safety of the top of a cliff, and the town is seemingly crawling with Pinkertons.
Hey, where's that little Irish pest?
I'm not quite sure. Trelawney's off trying to find out.
Has anyone been in the Blackwater, see how things lie?
Place is crawling with Pinkertons, bounty hunters, and pictures of Dutch and Hosea.
Well, we got a lot of money sitting in that town.
And that's where it's gonna remain for now.
Why haven't they hanged Sean, I wonder?
I think he's bait. Well, they want to trial him publicly.
Gentlemen, Sean is being moved. up the upper Montana, then to a federal prison out west.
Damn. Well, we can't be rescuing people from some federal prison. We either rescue him now or cut him loose.
We're not cutting anyone loose.
Of course not.
Ike's Skelding's boys are moving him to a camp nearby before handing him over to the government.
So, I guess we need to stop them before they get to camp.
As we ride along the ridge following the boat carrying Sean, Josiah Trelawney tells us about the girl that Dutch killed.
It's definitely as bad as we feared in there, Arthur.
I keep hearing about this woman, Heidi McCord. Some young mother they're saying Dutch murdered on the boat.
I don't know about that. I wasn't there. Bad day.
This detail keeps cropping up, but this is the first time this individual receives a name. Heidi McCord, a young mother that Dutch murdered on the boat. The gang manages to rescue Sean Maguire after a brief shootout with Ike Skelding's boys. However, there's no sign of the missing gang member Mac Callender. However, it won't be too long before we receive news on that front, and it will come from an unlikely source. Whilst Arthur takes Jack Marston fishing, their nice little afternoon out will be spoiled by two Pinkertons.
Hey, look at this.
And what?
This necklace I made.
Necklace?
For Mama.
Sure.
What a fine young man. And in such complex circumstances. Arthur, isn't it? Arthur Morgan?
Who are you?
Yes, Arthur Morgan. Vanderlyn's most trusted associate. You've read the files. Typical case. Orphaned street kid seduced by that maniac's silver tongue and matures into a degenerate murderer. Agent Milton, Agent Ross, Pinkerton Detective Agency, seconded to the United States government. Nice to finally meet. We know a lot about you.
Do you?
You're a wanted man, Mr. Morgan. There's $5,000 for your head alone.
$5,000? For me? Can I turn myself in?
We want Vanderlyn.
Oh, Dutch. I haven't seen him for months.
That's so. Because I heard a guy fitting his description robbed a train belonging to Leviticus Cornwall up near Granite Pass.
Oh, ain't that a little old-fashioned nowadays?
Apparently not. Listen. This is my offer, Mr. Morgan. Bring in Vanderlyn, and you have my word you won't swing.
Oh, I ain't gonna swing anyways, Agent,
Milton.
You see, I haven't done anything wrong, aside from not playing the games to your rules.
Spare me the philosophy lesson. I've already heard it from Mac Callender.
Mac Callender?
He was pretty shot up by the time I got to him. So really, it was more of a mercy killing. Slow, but merciful.
Agent Milton confirms he met Mac Callender after the events in Blackwater, found him shot up, wounded, and killed him, referring to it as a slow mercy killing, suggesting he interrogated him before ending his suffering. We will not be hearing from him anytime soon.
Enjoy your fishing, kid, while you still can.
So now we know the gang suffered 3 deaths. Mac and Davy Callender, along with Jenny Kirk. Sean Maguire was captured but later rescued, and John Marston was shot in the arm. Charles Smith sustained an injury to his hand. However, dialogue in the mission The Aftermath of Genesis in Chapter 1 suggests he was not present for the ferry robbery. We also know that it was likely a trap set by the Pinkertons to lure Dutch in, and when things went sideways, Dutch murdered an innocent bystander. And whilst skulking about camp, we may discover more information about this.
We're bad men. We're fighters, I know. But sometimes I start thinking about that girl. Well, Javier knows what we saw, and it weren't pretty. Ask Micah. Although he encouraged it, weren't pretty at all.
I just hope Dutch was right when he said that we had to do it to survive. Sometimes, you just gotta do really bad things, I guess.
I know what went on in Blackwater. Well, none of us is pretending that was something nice. But I guess, the way I see it, we're still here. And he's still right. I mean, look, you're all free to think what you want to think, but for me, I still believe in him. Because, well, he did what he did. But he did it for love. For all of us. Yes, I feel bad. They didn't deserve that, but listen, I just think, and I've been thinking about this a lot, I just think Dutch loves us. And being loved, well, we're gonna be okay.
These two perspectives are interesting because they're both referring to witnessing Dutch commit a cold-blooded murder. John finds himself disillusioned with the situation, whereas Javier is trying to justify it. But the interesting detail we get here is that Micah Bell encouraged Dutch to kill this girl. As I said earlier, Micah's involvement in the Blackwater robbery is massively significant, as plenty of dialogue in the game suggests it was him that encouraged Dutch to carry out the heist.
Let me ask you a question. Just what exactly went on in Blackwater?
Nice to see you, old fella. Why you ask?
Just what went on in Blackwater?
We got jumped. What do you think happened?
You said it was going to be easy.
I did the best I could, old man. I don't answer to you.
We're running for our lives because of a bad call you made.
We're bank robbers. Way I see it, it's an occupational hazard. Old bastard has lost his nerve.
Watch your mouth, Micah.
Jenny, Mac, Davy, they mattered to me.
Well, I'm real sorry, but dying, that's part of the game. You know that. This is unnecessary. Excuse me.
Throughout the story, Micah Bell seems to be quite pivotal to a lot of situations that don't quite go the gang's way. On several occasions throughout the story, he makes the gang's problems worse. Towards the end of the game, as we know, Micah turns traitor and begins informing on Dutch for the Pinkertons. But his actions prior to this seem a little bit too consistent to just be recklessness. So the question the Blackwater Massacre raises is, was it recklessness or is it sabotage? The debate as to whether or not Micah Bell was a traitor from the start is an interesting one, but I feel like it overcomplicates a relatively simple situation. Micah Bell says so himself. He is a survivor. Whatever is most convenient and best for him is what he will do. He has no loyalties, not to Dutch, not to the gang, only to himself. Perhaps Micah was aware it was a trap, however, it was a trap for Dutch, not him. If he was involved in the robbery, maybe he thought he could slip away with all of the money. Running with a gang that, truthfully, he does not care about, there were no risks to him, only to the others. Because he saved Dutch's life, he has Dutch's ear. Meaning he manipulated Dutch to carry out the robbery, hoping he would get something out of it whilst others would have to reap the consequences. I feel like this angle is reinforced by Micah's constant mentioning of returning to Blackwater to collect the money. His eye is on the prize and nothing else matters. So maybe at first it's just that, but then again the game casts doubt on Micah from more or less the very beginning, so I honestly would not be surprised either way. So, with everything we now know, here is what happened. In 1899, Dutch van der Linde set his eyes upon a ferry robbery in Blackwater, a job encouraged by Micah Bell. In carrying out the job, everything seemed to go smoothly, but suddenly, Pinkertons and police were everywhere. John Marston was shot, but it was only a flesh wound, and a gunfight ensued into the streets of Blackwater. It's unclear how Heidi McCourt factored in, however, I reckon she was likely used as a human shield by Dutch, similarly to how he uses a woman as a human shield in Red Dead Redemption, only shooting her to cause a shock, giving him a split second to make his move in an attempt to escape. During the gunfight that followed, Davy Callender was shot in the gut, and Mac Callender was seemingly wounded as well. According to Sean Maguire, he was knocked out more or less immediately when the trap was sprung. Whilst Mac was left behind, Davy managed to carry on until the rest of the gang regrouped, and it's during this escape where I'd imagine Jenny Kirk was shot. It's unclear how many lawmen and Pinkertons were killed, however the Blackwater Massacre was infamous for its body count, so it wasn't a small number. Unable to carry the money with them as they absconded, Dutch decided to stash it somewhere safe. And the people of Blackwater caught wind that there was $150,000 US just laying around somewhere. After the gang escaped, the Pinkertons locked the town down to prevent the gang from returning to collect the money. Agent Milton would catch up with Mac Callender, who was wounded and possibly dying, likely questioning him before killing him. When you get to the bottom of it, it's far less complicated than when it sounds, however the vast majority of events remain ambiguous, which only heightens its narrative importance. This key event, what really happened? And more importantly, how? A big question I find myself asking is, how did the Pinkertons know to set a trap for Dutch here? Well, as the story proves to us, the Van der Linde gang are never as subtle as they think they are. It's proven time and time again throughout at least chapter 2, 3 and 4. This would likely be more so the case with Blackwater, considering he has a connection to the town.
Did I ever tell you my mother's buried in Blackwater?
Really? She is?
Apparently so. I only found out from an uncle of mine years later. Last I knew, she was still outside Philadelphia. I left home at 15 and didn't see her again. She and I didn't always see eye to eye. I wasn't always a very obedient child.
I can only imagine.
Still, I loved her in my own way, and she me in hers. Somehow, even from the grave, she managed to have the last laugh.
I know it's a weak point, but it would make sense that a place where Dutch's mother was buried would be in the know about Dutch's activities as an infamous outlaw, and therefore, had he rolled into town, it wouldn't take long for somebody to figure out his identity. So maybe it wouldn't take the proper authorities long to put two and two together, even if it's merely a coincidence. Moving on, in the next part to this video, we're going to be talking about the other parties that were present. I feel as if the vast majority of the details surrounding the Blackwater Massacre in Red Dead Redemption were retconned, even if only quietly, in Red Dead Redemption 2 to better suit the story, but the obvious mention in this department is still going to be Landon Ricketts. Supposedly, Ricketts was involved in the Blackwater Massacre according to Red Dead Redemption, however in Red Dead Redemption 2 this possibility is never mentioned. It's said that Ricketts moved to Chuparosa, Mexico after the massacre as one of the reasons as to why he did, but he was already a famous gunslinger by 1899. I'd imagine his presence in Blackwater at this time would cause more of a ruckus than it perhaps did, at least with regards to Red Dead Redemption 2. Could be an oversight, or it could suggest that Ricketts was not there at all. It's unclear how Landon Ricketts would factor into the Blackwater Massacre as we know it from Red Dead Redemption 2 as well. It never comes up in dialogue between Ricketts and John, and romanticising incidents by putting individuals there who weren't to make it more interesting is pretty bog standard dime novel stuff. Maybe he was involved in the original Red Dead Redemption conceptualization of the Blackwater Massacre, but as far as it goes with Red Dead Redemption 2, I believe that this is one thing that's been retconned out, not through changing details, but through providing more of it, and it fits that it sort of, was he there, was he not, who knows. Moving on, according to Red Dead Redemption's game files, there is an audio dialogue that suggests that Archer Fordham's mother, Maybelle, was shot in the Blackwater Massacre, though her grave states she passed away on the 24th of July 1900. Besides this, minor character Willie Oates has dialogue suggesting that he too was present in Blackwater when the massacre took place, stating he was never going back to Blackwater, especially after what happened in 1899. And then, of course, there's Jimmy Brooks, a man Arthur encounters in Valentine who claims he saw him in Blackwater. But perhaps most interesting of all is one yet to be mentioned.
Hello, John. John Marston.
Do I know you?
I hope so. I seem to know you.
I'm pretty good at remembering faces.
Are you? Do you remember Hattie McCourt's face?
Who?
She was a girl Dutch Vanderlyn shot in the head on that raid on the ferry a few years back. Same one you got shot on. Pretty girl, until her eye was hanging out by a thread of tendon and her brain was plastered over a wall.
Not really.
Then why would you remember me, friend? You've forgotten far more important people than me.
The strange man mentions Heidi McCourt and her death in visceral detail as part of his morality test for John Marston. Sure, he may have read about it, however, something about this character makes me think he's more present throughout, an enigmatic otherworldly entity. The strange man always appears to be present when death is approaching, or as it's taking place in the case of Armadillo, for example, where an NPC in Red Dead Redemption 2 describes seeing him on the horizon. But perhaps most interesting is his seeming connection to Jimmy Brooks. Jimmy Brooks confronts Arthur outright, however he's clearly skittish and runs away as soon as Arthur decides to go and chat with him. Confronting a dangerous criminal is likely an incredibly dangerous thing to do, so he's not the smartest guy going, but fair enough. Anyway, this serves as a morality test. You can either kill him or you can spare him, and this functions as the introduction to the honor system. But in the strange man's cabin in the bayou, which is confirmed to be his the more you visit it, there is a poem about Jimmy Brooks, amongst other materials that link him to other goings-on in the world. If you kill him, it reads, there was a man called Jimmy Brooks who was always running into crooks, but the man from the ferry found him far too contrary. Now Jimmy's family don't see him very much. The beginning half of the poem remains the same if you spare his life, and simply says, till one chased him down and he had to talk his way round that Jimmy isn't as dumb as he looks. Now if Jimmy Brooks was always running into crooks, then I feel as if somebody would have killed him off long before he ever met Arthur Morgan. The only other mention of Jimmy Brooks in the entire game is on Register Rock, which says J. Brooks, US Post 1863, which is weird as Jimmy Brooks is not old enough for this to be him. However, whilst in reality you would shrug this off, in a video game there is no such thing as coincidence. And most interestingly, 1863 was the year Arthur Morgan was born. My theory is Jimmy Brooks is an apparition of the strange man, testing Arthur Morgan's morality in a way that better suits his individual character. So, Jimmy Brooks and the strange man perhaps were one and the same, may or may not have physically been in Blackwater, but because the strange man has proven his omnipresence, he basically was. But this video isn't about diving down that rabbit hole, it just proves two things. The strange man was indeed present in some capacity at the Blackwater Massacre, and in failing that, was clued up about it, and also the ferry robbery gone wrong was a hugely pivotal moment in both the lives of Arthur Morgan, John Marston, and the broader Vanderlyn gang on the whole. Moving on from that, in the aftermath, it's believed that Blackwater took a very long time to heal. In 1907, a bartender can be heard commenting on how many townsfolk believe that Blackwater will never recover. We will never know all of the specifics of what happened in the Blackwater Massacre. It's part of the charm of the story, but we've gone over the general outline and sapped every possible detail that we can. Did this make for a more concise and less convoluted video than my original one? I don't necessarily think so. However, I feel I left a load of details out in that one that I've covered here. So hopefully this longer video, as it turns out, has proven to be more informative. If not, look, it's just a nice, easy topic to revisit at the back end of this holiday season. Try not to deep it too much. Thank you all for watching. I really hope that you've enjoyed. Be sure to go ahead, leave a like, subscribe, share the channel with your friends and all that wonderful stuff. That would be really fantastic. If you like history, you can check out my history channel Decades via a link in the description. It's been going for quite a while now, and if you haven't subscribed already and history's your thing, then definitely check it out, as we've got quite the repertoire of content over there ready to go. And with any luck, of course, I will be seeing you all very soon with another video at some point, but until next time, please take care and goodbye.